Photographers, you've looked around, you've seen beautiful portraits and you've thought, I know, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a portrait photographer. You get your camera, you get a great face, whether it's a model or an actor, you get in the studio, you set the lights up and everything looks like utter dog shit. It's as flat as a pancake, there's shadows going everywhere. You're sitting there scratching your head thinking, hang on a minute, how do they do that? How can I get to that point where my portraits go, wow? Well, I'm here to tell you, yes, it's about lighting, yes, it's about approach, but there's something that's more important than that. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to another fabulous episode of the Lance Burkitt Encounter. You might notice today I've got no headphones on. That's because I bloody left them at home. Idiot, I know. I've got some others here, but they're a bit crap, so I'm just going to wing it. If we get any extraneous noise come in, I'll have to go and edit it afterwards because I can't hear because I'm as deaf as a fucking doornail, as you know. Also, I'm still suffering with the back. That's going to be a long time suffer, so you'll see that I'm fidgeting. I can't sit still. I'm sat here doped up to the nth degree with all manner of pharmaceuticals, which I hate. And also, I've got a TENS machine running on my back, giving me little pinches, which is kind of making it bearable. But at the same time, it's not great sitting here. I'm a little bit uncomfortable. But I've enjoyed getting back into the podcast the last couple of weeks, and I want to keep it going. And I want to share a bit more of my experience, particularly in terms of portraits, because it's something that I've done for the best part of 20 years, and I've done it to a really good degree for probably 17 of those years. I get a lot of repeat customers, whether that's for actor portraits, model portraits, family portraits, corporate portraits even. So I think I've got a lot to offer in terms of how I can get you guys to get your portraits to the place where you can be looking at them and think, fucking hell, I did that. So I'm going to take you back down my road, which is a long and winding one, best part of 20 years. I'm going to show you some of the mistakes I made. But within that, this podcast is going to be a bit of an instructional sort of demo as well. So I'm going to show you some of the techniques I've used over the years to not just capture portraits, but capture them for a specific thing, specific way. We'll look at some technical things. Obviously, we'll look at lighting. We'll look at composure, or composition, if you like. We'll look at something else, which is a lot more important than that, but we're going to get into that in part 2. But for part 1, I'm just going to go over how you can initially look at somebody's work. A big inspiration for me, you'll know if you watch the podcast, was David Bailey. I love the simplicity of his work, but also the lighting. What I noticed quite early on in my fledgling photographer career, for those of you that don't know, I'd been going for not even 6 months, and I thought, I know, I'll get a studio. That'll fucking sort me out. I'll know exactly what I'm doing. I can show the world how good I am, and I can brag, and I can say, look, I've got my studio. And as it turned out, it was probably the worst thing I could have done, because I learned a few quid, and I did learn quickly. Some of the work I was doing then was dross. But within that, what happened was I got a lot of people coming to hire the studio, a lot of GWCs, guys with cameras, and I quickly realised that they didn't have a fucking Scooby-Doo what they were doing. They had no idea. They were just plugging and playing. They weren't setting anything up. If somebody set the lights, let's say that somebody had been doing some fine art, and they got their light set for F16, they would just come in and use that. Whatever they were doing, they wouldn't know how to tweak the lights, move them around, get shapes and shadows they were looking for. And I was like that when I first started, but I very quickly learned through process. So I was helping people in the studio figure out how to get better portraits. So that helped me get better portraits. And within probably a couple of years, it took me to get to a point where I could instinctively know what I was doing, camera-wise, lights-wise, approach-wise. But even I got stuck at a point. I got a point where the lighting was always great. I got to a point where I could do it pretty easily. The edits were easy, but there's still something missing. We're going to cover that in part 2. But it's the biggest thing of all. So for part 1, we're just going to go through some examples of my work from over the years. Now, I spent a bit of time last night going through my quite vast portfolio and put together a bunch of examples that I thought we could work through today, which might help you guys start from scratch. If you're a photographer who's just new to it and wants to do portraits but hasn't got a clue where to start, or if you're an experienced photographer and you feel like your portraits are just dead, and maybe you could do with some lighting help techniques and tips and tricks. So we'll go through that first. So I was looking last night, and even just glancing through my portfolio, I've got a couple of hundred different portraits and faces into a folder. And I pretty quickly realised that in an hour's podcast, I ain't going to be able to go through all them. So I went through and picked out the ones where I felt like I'd done something different in terms of lighting and composition. And there's 3 or 4 examples I'll run through with you in part 1 and part 2. Hopefully you can get enough out of them to be able to go away and go, that's made a big difference to my portraits. And I guess really what I should have done is showed you some of my really early portraits, which were what we might call dog shit. And if you can see, I don't know how well you can see these because of the glare of the lights, but I've got portraits everywhere because it's my favourite genre, but I'll run through some on the screen, obviously. But I probably should have shown you some of my early days stuff. But I'm going to start with some from... in fact, I will show you an early day one. I've shown this before in a different tutorial, but if you look now, this picture on screen, this is a picture of Lloyd. Lloyd's was a fine actor. I'm not sure if he was acting a model anymore, but he was a lovely guy. Great face, great figure, very sporty, very handsome. This was kind of like, I don't know, maybe a year in, something like that. And I'm starting to find my feet with lighting setups, and you can see this one here. This is a couple of years in. This is a fabulous model. Again, I don't think she models anymore, but I was going for a 2 light setup here, and I've kind of quite nailed it, but not quite. I mean, it's not the most horrendous portrait you've ever seen, but the lighting's a little bit not quite right. It's not brutal, but it's not quite right. So I could have showed you some more horrendous ones where they're overexposed and the face has got massive shadows everywhere. One of the things I noticed very early on was photographers that didn't know any better would you come in the studio and let's say I got, I don't know, a couple of soft boxes set up, a couple of umbrellas, a couple of snoots. They would end up with everything on, just piling light onto the subject, hoping that it would somehow bring something creative up. And what it does actually when you put too much light on a subject is it flattens them. And not only do you have horrible shadows going across the nose and down from the eyelids and all that, makes them really flat. I mean, there's not much you can rescue in any edit. So what I did initially was I figured out if you wind it back to basics, and I always kind of equate this to like if you're working outside, you've only got one light source, haven't you? If you start with basics and one light, provided you position it in the right place to get the effects you want it to do, and that's important, you'll get a much more three-dimensional photograph than you will if you put a couple of lights on thinking that you're clever. I mean, the example on screen now, it's kind of a little, it didn't make her look very beautiful. It made her look a bit edgy and a bit masculine. And that lady isn't anything but that. So at the time, I didn't probably know any better, but now I do. I wouldn't light it quite like that again. I would light it similar, but in a little bit more flattering way. And again, you know, if you're using window light, daylight, this was a fabulous Misha. The studio at the time had some old windows. I mean, the windows look crap. But just that light coming in from a little under reflector, bringing the light in a little bit more. A pretty simple setup, but not lots of lights going on everywhere. So I'd seen photographers doing this, and I just thought, no. So I went back and I kind of looked at basics. I initially thought about back in the day before artificial light was a thing. We only had the sun. Studios used to have a big gaping glass window, and the sun would come in. So you only got one light source, unless you're redirecting it with panels and stuff. You've only got one light source. So that's where I started from. Okay, keep the light simple. You're always going to get a shadow, and that shadow will go wherever, it depends wherever you put the light to make the shadow go. Make sense? So I've got camera and one light. Now, what else from that do we need? I mean, I've said before, I used to have guys coming in and they'd set up the studio, or they wouldn't even set up the studio. They'd just set up, connect the camera to the sink, not the kitchen sink, the synchronization, stand the model in the middle and off they go. And they didn't know if they were overexposed, underexposed or whatever. But a key thing about depth of field and focus in a portrait is that it's a big part of the narrative. It's not just about how much light you're getting on the subject and where the light's going. It's not just as easy as standing the model there, put some light on them, take the shot, because the f-stop or the aperture size on your camera will determine massively how much of the image is in or out of focus. So you'll see some, you get some real clever photography where you've got a wide angle lens with a fast lens, so I don't know, 1.8 aperture, to get those funky kind of like, I don't know, almost like skater boy kind of pictures. And sometimes that works for portraits depending on what you're doing, but a classic portrait for an actor, somebody who needs a professional portrait, that's not any good. That's not what they need. They need just really sharp, clean headshots, head and shoulder shots, portraits, which work for them, which show them in their best light and are as much as you can in focus. So you've got to look at where your sweet spot is on your lens. And for most lenses, f11 is that sweet spot. And that is because the distance you stood from the model, you focus on the model's face or the model's eyes. Mostly everything in the shot forward of the subject and behind it is going to be in focus. So f11 is a lovely, lovely sweet spot I've found on most lenses. Very rare I stray from that. Maybe f10 sometimes, but f10, f11, that's the ballpark where I'm always shooting my portraits. Shutter speed will depend on what your synchronization speed of the lights you're using is. So somewhere normally between 1/125th of a second or 1/200th of a second. Again, depending on the sync speed of your lights. Nowadays, you can get them that go up to thousands of, but do you need that for a portrait? If you're shooting, I don't know, moving subject, ice skate, dancers, that kind of thing, yeah. But for somebody who's sitting for a portrait who's not moving much, you're not moving much, 1/25th, 1/125th or 1/200th a second, fine. ISO, again, you've got loads of light, so you only basically your lowest ISO 100 on most cameras or whatever it is. So you've got your kind of settings. Now, obviously, you've got to go into a studio and tell your light to do what you want it to do. Light, be this. Bright. And that's, you can say that to most photographers and then they'll spend hours with a little light meter making sure that the light's giving them what they want, which is fine. I use experience and judgment and knowledge. I know that a 200-watt Bowen's light on 3/4 power at 4 foot from the studio will give me f11. From the studio, 4 foot from the model will give me f11. I know that from practice. I don't spend time boring the model out of the brain, going backwards and forwards with a light meter because I don't need to now. But if you like, you can. So get your lights, so your lights are falling nice. Now, the next most important thing, once you've got that worked out, your picture's going to be nice and sharp. You're not going to get any shake because 1/125th or 1/200th of a second is great unless you've had too much beer the night before and you've got a bit of a shake on. Don't need a tripod, you can handheld at that. You've got to think, right, where's the light going to go? Why? What's the mood I'm trying to set? So do I want a smiley, happy, everything's really bright and in your face? Do I want moody? So head and shoulders shot with a light coming across, nice soft shadows. Do I want harsh shadow? What is it you want to do? So that's probably the most difficult thing that you're going to have to try and discover, because mimicking, even if you've got a reference image, like take one of these, for example, you can't see it, you guys can't see it, but there's one, where is it gone? Oh, it's not even there. A simple one like setup where you've got a semi-shadow going on one side of the face. So we're not talking about horrible shadows like the Rembrandt. I hate all that shit, because Rembrandt always used to paint his pictures with a harsh light, sunlight, big triangle-shaped shadow on the nose. We don't want any of that. We want nice, soft shadows just off one side of the face. I'll show it on screen. And we're going to use that as our base. We're going to try and copy that. So it's important exactly where we put our light, because we want to create that. So you can get your light, you're going to move it around your model so you get to the point where you want it, right? So now you're ready to go, you're ready to roll. What I used to use for teaching my students, both at university and privately, is this little setup, this little Adobe PSD setup by a guy called Kevin Kertz. Now, I went to his website yesterday just so I could credit him properly, and it doesn't exist anymore. I couldn't find Kevin online anywhere, so just want to say thanks to Kevin for devising this little thing years ago, because I've used it for a long time, and it saved me having to make one, and everything's there, and it's really brilliant. And I'm sure there's other people got versions of it out there, their own, which they use, but for this example today, I'm going to use Kevin's because it worked for me. And you can see from the layers down the side, you can change everything. You can take it, put it on, move things around, do whatever you want. So For this first example, I'm going to use quite a difficult setup. And I say difficult because I've just described how to set up and light one person. But what if you've got two people? What if it's a family shoot? What if it's multiple heads you've got to try and make sure? And you know it's like if you've got a light coming from left to right and you've got the person that stood closest to the light and this person stood slightly off them, you're going to cast a shadow on them. So you're shafted, aren't you? So what do? Well, I'll give you an example of the lovely twins, Kirsty and Sarah. Hi, Kirsty and Sarah, if you're watching. You can find them online. Twinnies. They're still modelling. They still do all that stuff. Lovely set of ladies. So this particular day we were doing some fashion, and without out of the fashion, we were just doing full length, and they want some headshots as well. And so I've got a. We'll open this to Photoshop because it's easy to look at. Some things are just too raw for the podcast, too honest for YouTube, and too controversial for Spotify. That's why I started the lock-in. The lock-in is my weekly email where all the filters are completely taken off. Every week I share my ideas, my brain farts, my thoughts on photography, education and reality. No algorithms, no polish, just the truth straight to your inbox. If you like the Lance Burkitt encounter, you're going to love the lock-in. Let's get into it. Well, I've got the lighting set up like this, and you can see on screen what I did and what I set. And I've got the picture of the girls that are in there, so you can see what it is within that I was trying to do. So initially I thought, shall I use a big octobox? I've got 1.5 meter octobox, great big thing, which will cover a whole person, 6 foot plus, floor to ceiling. But I thought, no, because there's two of them, one of them is going to be a massive shadow. And the last thing I want is anybody to be in massive shadow. Right? We don't want one of them to look really good, one not so good. So what I did was I centered them on the stage, and I used that lovely brown backdrop because it's just nice. It's nicer than grey, nicer than black, nicer than white. It's just something slightly different, brings a bit of colour out, shows the ladies in real good view with a bit of backlight. And so I decided to go for a slightly above light, slightly above them, looking down at them, slightly off to the left. So you can see here, I've got the main light, or the key light as people like to call it here, but it's above them looking down, and it is slightly tilted to the right like that, so it's looking left to right. To the left of that, I've got a hair light projected on the backdrop, and I've got a blank masking board there, stopping that light hitting the model or the lens. So this light here is going onto the backdrop. This light here is lighting the ladies from top down. You can see, if you look, if we get a picture of the ladies up and have a look, like that, you can see the lights coming down because you can see the shadow on the floor and you can see the shadow under the chin. You can see the highlights of the hair and the lights coming down that way. Yeah, all right, we get that slightly in front of them, looking down. Set to F10. Yeah, key light set to F10. Side light, which all that is doing is putting a little spot on the background to bring them off a little bit. You can see that kind of vignette on the background there. If we look at it, you can see it there. Yep, you can see that little vignette, that side. And then off to the right, go back to the right thing, we've got a umbrella, a bounce umbrella, so the light's coming from the light, hitting the umbrella, coming back onto scene, extremely low, so it's like how many stops less than the key light, because I only want a little bit, and all I want to do there is just to give them a little bit of separation from the background, so you can see on the back of the shoe, the back of the leg, up here, that light is just, and it's very, very faint, and it's a good few stops lower than the key light, because I only just want it to be noticed. So that's the basic setup, and I think if I look in here, look, you can see here is the actual setup. So you can't see the light off to the left, which is projecting the spot on the back. You can see the rim light, which is just going to cause that little up the side of them, and then the key light up at the top looking down, and that was it. Now, I know I've made that sound really easy, but what that does is it's allowed both of their faces to be beautifully illuminated. So if I decide, all right, ladies, we've got some great pictures, some great fashion pictures there, how about we do a headshot? We can come in and we've got beautiful light on both of them. Now, one of them is stood slightly in front of the other one, just so we don't get as much shadow going behind them. But I think for a two-shot setup, That is actually pretty good. I do say so myself. Oh, look at what I've done. That was a mistake, Lance. Didn't want to do that. I wanted to do this. So we'll just do it quickly because we're on time. So if I wanted it to be a portrait, I wouldn't crop it like that. But we've got a lovely portrait, beautifully lit. But we can step away from that. We can do long shots, 3/4 shots, head shots, all in that one setup without having to move anything, redress the set, get the girls to move at all. It's all nice and contained in that one little specific setup, which is, now you've seen it, hopefully you can quickly replicate that. The even better thing about it is, if you're doing, I don't know, you might be doing a workshop day, or you might be doing something that requires them to step off, somebody else to step in, it's ready to go. It works for one person or for two people. You don't have to mess around with the set, really anything at all. It's ready to go. And I'm just having a quick look to see if I've got anything else which is set up the same or similar. Don't think I have in this folder, but I'll have used that numerous times for numerous different things across the years. And it's a pretty basic setup which gives fabulous results. I think you'll agree that that's a pretty fabulous result, won't you? And again, when it comes to edit, a little bit of colour balance check, a little bit of levels, a little bit of skin retouching, poof, job's done. So one simple setup which allows you to do a fashion and portrait shot, which is pretty simple. Now, I know I've jumped straight into a multi-light setup there. I realise that. But the reason I've done that is because I'll show you, you'll see as we go along now. We take the two side lights out, take the F10 out and the F16 out. We've got another setup ready to go. We'll skip to setup 4 because this is very similar to what we just had. We're just going to take the two side lights off and we're just going to go with the highlight, the key light front. And as you can see that, yeah. Now you're going to say to me, Lance, that was completely different. Well, of course it does, because firstly, we've taken off the backlight, which is producing the vignette effect on the back. That's gone. We took the rim light off, so everything on the right-hand side here, completely gone. All we've got is that key light coming down. But now you're saying, yeah, but look how little light is on his face. Yes, I've changed the f-stop from F10 to F11, but that won't make that much effect. Now, the reason this has changed so much is because instead of pointing the light slightly down and kind of like flushing at the girls, Jerry on this shot has stood directly underneath the light and it's tilted almost straight down on him. Hence you can see the crown here and the light, and the shadows are all almost straight under his cheeks. So he's almost pretty much straight under it. Whereas if you look at the one, in example 1 from the girls, they're stood away from it slightly, maybe 3 feet, 4 feet away from it slightly, yeah? So the light's coming at them rather than down on them. But it's the same setup. We've just taken the two side lights off. We've just swiveled the light round a bit, stood the model underneath it, completely different setup. And if you look at that setup then with Jerry, you can see here F11. I made a mistake on that there. I should say F11. You see here with Jerry, I made a mistake here. That one should say set to F18. So tilting the light, reduce the amount of light that's falling on Jerry, have it coming down to cause massive shadows underneath him. He's pulling quite crazy expressions to look quite dark. At this point in his acting career, he's looking for work which is a bit, different to what he's done, because he's got a real nice, pleasant, happy, welcoming face. I'll show you another shot in a minute. He was going for something different. I want to show a bit of range, so we went for a little bit of a sinister look. And look at that. That's pretty good for Jerry. And it's quite nice. And if you look at Jerry, obviously this is not the same setup. It's similar. We've got a little bit happy smiling Jerry, same guy. Also, the fabulous Dean Andrews, a fellow Rotherham kid and actor, Emmerdale, Life on Mars, all that stuff. He asked me to do him some serious portraits. 2012, I think this was. And again, if you look at the setup, the lighting setup, let's just bring Dean into there. On this occasion, what we did with Dean was we just brought the light back down so it's parallel to his head, pointed it at him, but had it going kind of across him so you can see the big shadow rather than the smaller shadow. But it's the same setup. Switch back to F11. Stand there, F11, no backlight, no side light. The only bit of other light we get coming in is a little bit of reflection off the white walls of the studio. Sometimes gives you a little bit of a rim, which is nice. And pretty much it's the same setup. All I've done is, instead of it facing down on Jerry, I've just brought it back round so it's facing across Dean. Switch to F11 for a nice sharp portrait. Clean lines. Lovely focus. Nice subtle shadows. Moody face. Just want to say one thing here which will help you. A lot of it comes down to lighting, person, pose, look, all that. But also, if we just look at this other shot of Dean, what he was wearing made a big difference. Same setup, same day, same time, place, everything. But you see how his jumper cuts his neck? That jumper cutting across his neck. Not great. Not a great... It's not very flattering. It kind of cuts his shoulders off. It makes him look stumpy, short and stumpier. So we switch to the open shirt. Suddenly, just gives it a little bit more gravitas. So it's important to consider what your subject's wearing when they're doing the portraits, because I think you'll agree that one of Dean to the left, so it's a nice picture. It kind of works as a sinister picture. It makes him look shorter, whereas on the right he looks a bit more tall and gravitas there. So that's why I did that. So they're two quite easy setups, which are, just rattle through them in 20 minutes, but they will help you no end in doing your portraits, in creating fab things for people, whether they want moody, nice, happy, beautiful, bit of fashion in there as well. Two quick setups which just kind of put you on the right track. So you're armed with at least 4 setups there out of 2 variations, which you can wheel into any studio and pretty much get away with stuff. You can look a bit like a genius. You're starting to figure your way through how to shoot and pose, but there's more. So in part 2, we're going to cover a few more lighting setups, but we're also going to get into the thing that's still missing in your portraits, which is going to actually push them right over the edge. I'll see you in part 2. Cheers. Thanks for tuning into Lance Burkitt Encounter today. I really do appreciate you spending some time with me here in the world of photography, education and reality. If you enjoyed the episode and feel like you learned a bit of something, do me a favour, like, subscribe and share the channel with somebody you feel really needs to hear it. And if you're able to, and if you'd like to, please head over to lanceburkitt.com/shop and treat yourself to some of the Lance Burkitt Encounter merchandise. After all, that's how we're going to keep the channel and the podcast alive and completely independent. Until next time, keep shooting with purpose and stay true to yourselves. Cheers.